so that we'll be able to dive deep and understand together what really happens when we try to train, upskill, or help grow our team members. Because the gap that we found in the industry is that there might be a lot of knowledge that is currently available, but how does that knowledge translate into practical application? And with the Keeping Up with Frontline series, that's the question that we want to address through the various initiatives that we're going to roll out. So for today's panel discussion, we're going to be looking at what are the ground realities of training the frontline teams. Now, this topic is very important for all of us because we've seen that the traditional approaches to training is not able to keep up with how vastly and rapidly the retail environment is changing. We have so many new products that are coming out in the market. We are very constantly upgrading our processes. Our customers want a better in-store experience. Our workforce themselves are saying that they would like to train, upskill themselves, learn new skills, because they've realized that that's how they can stay relevant and that's how they can adapt to the changing environment. So through this panel discussion, we want to be able to answer the question, how is it that we can better equip ourselves to implement training programs and initiatives that can actually deliver on the training outcomes that we plan? And in order to do this, I have an absolutely brilliant panel with me today on this panel discussion. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce the three of them. We have Ms. Anurita De, who is the Senior L&D Manager at Spencer's, and she has over 14 years of cross-industry experience. And through this panel discussion, we're going to hear how some of her initiatives and strategies have played out at Spencer's and what are some learnings that she has to share with us. We also have Mr. Siddhant, who's the Brand Standards and Training Manager at Burger King. And he's been working in this field for about 12 years. And something that I'm very excited to hear from him is how his strategies translate into practical outcomes out in the field. And we also have Mr. Rilif with about 12 years of experience in the field. And what I personally like about his expertise is that he's grown up in the ranks from the store team members, from being part of a store team to now being the deputy manager at Jubilant Foodwork. So hearing from his perspective, I think will bring a very relevant lens to our discussion. So it is the hope that through this discussion that we're going to have today, that we will be able to uncover some practical strategies that we can take back and use in our organizations to say, this is maybe one thing that could help improve training interventions. Before we get started with the discussion, I'd like to let our audience know that we have a Q&A section available in Zoom. So if you look at the Zoom toolbar, there is a Q&A button that you can click on and type in your questions as and when you feel that there is something that you'd like to clarify or maybe reflect upon. The idea with this is that during the panel discussion, if you have any questions, we'd love to take it as part of the discussion in context. But if you feel that your question is more suited to the end of the panel discussion where we have a more generic discussion, feel free to leave it for the end as well. So you can choose to leave your Q&A either during the discussion or at the end during our generic Q&A session. So to kick us off for the panel discussion, what I'd like the panelists to share with us is, can you talk us through a training implementation or a training plan that you have designed and implemented in your organization? Can you walk us through what was the need that was there that your training plan was trying to achieve? And how did you plan it? And what is something that was the outcome of that particular training plan? So maybe Siddhant, we'll start with you first, and then Anurita and Rilif, we can go in that order. Over to you, Siddhant.
Hi, so thank you for giving me this opportunity. Glad to be here. So the training intervention that which we went on in my early days was what we saw in the restaurant, wherein you see a lot of equipments that are placed in the restaurants, right? So you see these equipments need a lot of care, that we can say. So initially we had a problem wherein there were multiple breakdowns. We saw multiple breakdowns, which in turn costed a lot. So when we say breakdown, the equipment has stopped functioning. So what we did was we sat with the ops team and the maintenance team, so as to figure out that what exactly can be done to make sure that we can help in getting the cost reduced. We came up with a plan which ran for a while and is currently a part of our curriculum, wherein we make sure that for every equipment, what exactly, how do you avoid breakdowns, and what kind of preventive maintenance that you can do, understanding the calendars, and escalating at the right time. So knowing when to escalate a certain problem. So let's, for example, there is a certain equipment, and if you notice this kind of a behavior, this is the time wherein you have to escalate. Don't wait, right? So things like that we covered under that, and eventually we saw a great reduction in the breakdown part, wherein people were uh, escalating it to the right vendors, escalating it to the right people, and in turn we were able to reduce costs. Yes, the program was a little lengthy, but the outcomes were not going to come in a night, but yeah, they were supposed to come in a span of time. And as I said before, this is now a part of a curriculum now. So this is what we've done.
Very nice. I think what I took from that is that you had a cross-functional discussion making. So you sat with your operations team, you sat with all of your existing team members and said what can work for all of us, and you came up with a plan with the if and else condition, right? If this happens,
Okay.
do this, escalate to this individual. And I like that you called out that this didn't happen in a day, that it did take some time for the outcomes to appear, and you kind of put the entire program back into your curriculum, which now
Yes.
drives, I'm assuming, the retention for much longer. So
Sure.
thank you, Siddhant. That was really insightful. Anrita, over to you.
Thanks, Susanna. Thanks for having me. One initiative that is top of my head is the program that we coined and branded was in terms of the spirit of service excellence. This is
Hmm.
specifically for a service-driven organization, and so we were trying to make an attempt to go to the next level of service excellence, right?
Hmm.
Beat any service industry. You talk about a retail, a hospitality, a healthcare for that matter. The quest to deliver better, the quest to do better for your customer is always there. And this
Hmm.
particular program, the way we coined at that given point of time, was more in terms of hearing it from the customer themselves. Most of the such industry that I mentioned, like be it a retail, hospital, hospitality, you will have some mechanism to hear it from the customer directly, be it a net promoter score, be it a third party vendor doing mystery audit for you. You will know their pain point, you will know what is something that you are doing making your customer unhappy, right? So we had the entire analysis done, and once we when I say we, the L&D team did the analysis for the operation team from a
Mhm.
very neutral perspective.
Mhm.
And then we presented to the ops head, to all the leaders present in the boardroom, stating that these are the pain point that has come out.
Mhm.
And only learning cannot be one way, but yes, the training is going to be a big part of it. However, we will also require certain element in terms of upgradation. For example, a better system in place where the billing has to be done, where the discharge summary has to take has to be obtained. And when we did a lot of analysis in terms of the pain point, the complaints, we got buckets of issues. They were behavioral, they were operational in nature, and so on and so forth. So when we deep dive more in terms of the behavioral issues that our staff exhibited in front of the customer, I'm referring to not retail or Spencer. I'm referring to a different organization, which was into healthcare. A lot of it, when it's healthcare, a lot of it, the patient relative also experiences a lot, right? They're going through this emotional up and down more than the patient himself or herself. And we curated series of program, we delivered, and we went back to see how the patient are experiencing, or the patient relatives are experiencing. Are they experiencing the same issues? Are there different type of issues? Or they are saying that this has actually improved? So this was a 1 year kind of an initiative. It was run across 3 units. We had a huge coverage. We had to run master trainers, we had to have trainers, internal trainers, educators to come with us to take that training on a mass. but it actually was a very beautiful, a very strong intervention which has a direct business impact. And I would say any program, when you do the right analysis, when you take people not only from the top or bottom, but from 360-degree, you will see a better result in terms of any training delivery.
Very nice. So what I took back from that is the fact that you understood the need because you did the research. The primary source of data was your customer feedback, and you took that and analyzed it, put them into buckets, and then drove that initiative for a year or so. I think that clearly tells us that there is a strategy in place into how you
True.
went from the training needs analysis to the entire implementation for it.
Yeah,
I think now, in terms of context, we have a question from Amitava, which I think blends into what you were talking about in
sure.
terms of how can we look at the behavioral gaps analysis, because you talked about that there were gaps, that one of the buckets was behavior.
Yeah.
How did that analysis kind of come through, and how did your intervention specifically address that behavioral gap?
Fair enough. So, when it comes to a behavioral intervention, I would highly recommend never make it a day or two kind of intervention. Before that, have a clear understanding in terms of what are the behavior that you want to see a shift in. For example, if I refer to customer service or communication, it's a big umbrella. But what part of customer service are you referring to as gesture? Are you referring to a certain, standards of service? So spell it out correctly in terms of the context of the intervention or the issue that the problem that you're trying to solve.
Mhm.
For example, let's say communication. Again, it's a huge concept to talk about. It can covers in terms of verbal, non-verbal, leadership communication, so on and so forth. So identify your parameters, define them. For example, let's say you want your sales people to be more assertive rather than being compliant. So assertiveness is a sub part of your like communication skills program. What is assertiveness for you and for your organization? Define it,
Hmm.
curate a program, run it, and then see and go back and see, uh, are they able to communicate effectively? Are they able to negotiate, hold their ground? If they're doing it, they're not only doing it with the vendors or the distributors, but also internally as well. So if you're teaching them few tips and tricks in terms of how to hold a assertive communication, then all those behaviors that you have taught needs to be revisited in terms of the behavior exhibited at work
Mhm.
again and again and again at different point of time, and it has to be a process intervention. I would highly recommend a 4 hours workshop or a 2 day offsite workshop will not help. Make it a bit by bit with action learning plan, with taking their seniors input in place, 360 feedback as a mechanism to see if the learning is happening, and then curate and deliver and see where it is going for you.
Great. I think that kind of shed some light on it, breaking it down, defining it, and then doing it bit by bit is something that
Yes.
we can take away from it. So we have answered that question. Over to you, Rilif, to share your experience of training plan intervention.
Yeah. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I would like to share, one of my training intervention experiences. Since there was a need of an hour for a digital application, which helps team members not only for their learning but also for their growth. Right. So as an organization, digitalization is a big aspect, and to help that, we have onboarded a new learning application, right? And obviously, whenever a new change or a new addition comes, especially at a ground team, right? So usually they will not confront and accept it, adopt it. So basically, the adoption rate was very low, not only in terms of learning but also in terms of team development or team members growth. uh, the digitalization was the solve for the faster growth. However, this was not happening, and due to the lower adoption, I think there was a need for a training intervention, maybe at a ground level. Right. So what I have done is I have planned. Obviously, I can train each and every team member. However, there are few people, maybe a training champs or a restaurant managers, who can go ahead and motivate their teams through awareness, or maybe some sort of uh, what what will help them. I mean, for example, if they will start using the learning app, how this app will help them, right? So number one, they will get some information or maybe some skills through the app, which they can apply in their daily task. Their task will get easier. Number two, this app will help them grow in the organization. They will get promoted, right? So this is how I have designed a program or maybe a competition among restaurant training champs. So this actually, competition was among the training aces. However, the adoption was, driven at team member level. So the training aces started uh, awareness about the application to the team members, those who were joining new. They've started to, inform them. What I have made is I've made some sort of parameters, picked for a few important parameters like how is the login rate. As soon as a new team member comes in, they log into the application, what is the learning compliances, and what is the career progression compliances. What I have done is I've merged them and made a ranking at the store level. So the store level ranking means store training champ, so not the store, but the representative was the store champ. So in this way, in a cluster or maybe in the circle, what I have started is I've started recognizing the training champs in the circle and the cluster. So this actually helped to build some sort of competition among them. This helped me drive those three major agendas which I was tracking. And at the end, team members started using the application, and adoption rate was very high due to this training intervention, or maybe I can say a competition, healthy competition between the training champs. So this is how I identified a gap, made some sort of competition, started tracking over it, and then delivered the numbers.
Brilliant. I think you've taken us from what the need was, how you decided to track it, and a step-by-step discussion of what it is that you actually did for adoption in your stores, how you drove it from the restaurant champ, your training ace, you had competition, and you had the three metrics, which was the login rate, learning compliance, and the career progression compliance. I think that gives us a very holistic view on how a training plan implementation can be successful if it comes from various means. I think towards your discussion point, we have a question from Umesh talking a little bit about adoption of digitization. So he's asking us about how did you empower maybe tier 2 or tier 3 staff to kind of undertake this training without having to push for, let's say, incentivization or a rewards and recognition program. So if you can shed some light on that.
Right. So obviously, maybe tier two or tier three of adoption rate would be lower, right? So maybe people who are at those cities don't know the much about the application, or not aware about the online platforms, right? So number one thing is we should have a application which is very simpler in terms of usage, right? So this will help them to, at least whenever they come on the platform, they will be easier for them to at least learn something from them. And if it is about the career progression, obviously they will get something out of it, right? This is not only about the incentivization. There was no incentive which I have planned for any of the candidate. It was just an motivation, nothing bigger than that. So motivation was about, I wanted to be come number one, number two, number three, like that, right? So there was no kind of incentives. I just tried to recognize them between within their clusters, within their circles, just to other training champs or other store managers were looking, okay, this guy is driving this like a champion. So this kind of healthy competition motivates them to do something in the restaurant. And for a team member, what is in it for me, right? So if I'm a team member who is working in tier 3 or maybe tier 4 city, right, if I'll start adopting the technology, obviously number one, I will get some sort of learnings out of it. And number two, if there is a career progression which is part of the learnings, then it's a double benefit for me, right? So always what I try to do is I just try to think of a of my participants' perspective and plan my training interventions accordingly. So this actually will help, to effectively drive the training program.
Got it. So three things I think that you're going to recommend. You're saying simple application to use. The second one was how you're answering the question, what's in it for me? Why do I have to use the application or engage in this training program? And the third thing that you talked about is how the store team members will ensure that they take part in this training intervention because there is some sort of a healthy competition that you're kind of driving, which has no external incentive. It's just the it's extraneous motivating factor that says, I'm going to be on top. I want to be first, second, and third. So that I think clearly it answers that particular question. So I'm just going to circle back to Siddhant and talk about the next bit that we want to look at, where after you've looked at your training intervention, how do you evaluate it? And you can use the same example that you walked us through or any other scenario that you've come across to say, what does the evaluation of a training implementation look like? Especially in terms of outcomes that you can present to your stakeholders. Because usually in the training industry, we're looking at knowledge which tells us in order to evaluate a training intervention, ensure it aligns to your business goals. But how do we track that? What does that look like in reality? If Siddhant, you can walk us through that first. Lilith will come to you next, and we can end with Anuradha's thoughts on that question.
Right. So, when we talk about evaluating a certain training program or a training plan, right, one of the major contribution that will play, I mean, one of the things that will play a very important role while evaluating your training program would be your supervisor input, as in the audience that you are training to. Their supervisor input will be able to tell you in a much better manner what exactly you wanted to achieve and what currently you have achieved. So that's one. So I guess a 360-degree feedback kind of thing will be able to give you a bigger picture than just looking at numbers. That's part one. When you are looking, if there are certain training programs which are bound to have improvements in terms of numbers, like for example, if you're training for a particular, let's say, product, right? So if you're training a set of sales executives on a particular product, after your training is completed, after your interventions are completed, you can directly look at the numbers and then connect to your audience itself, that okay, how well you are able to pitch that particular product, and is there anything else or anything, any other training intervention that is required. Maybe your program needs some changes, or maybe your program needs some updates, right? So for example, you have a new product that is coming in, you have designed your program in a well particular manner, you have executed in a correct manner, and then once you take feedback, so feedback as in not the immediate feedback but something that you do after a month, you go back to your teams and you connect to them and you talk to them and you tell, and then you figure out that whether your training have actually helped them or not. And then of course you can have your numbers. If you have your sales, you have your product selling, I mean, if the product is selling fast and the people are able to explain the product better to the customer, you can always go on the ground and look at that, right? However, uh, if you want to have a clear picture, a 360-degree feedback is something which will give you a bigger picture, and adding on the numbers, if it is sales and everything, yes, your numbers would help you a lot. Your the sales figures that might go up, and then connecting to the teams again to refresh your training plans will help you better.
Got it. So I really like the fact that you brought in the qualitative aspect of it to say, can we get 360 feedback from the direct supervisors of your trainees, so that because they're the ones who are directly in contact with your trainees to say, this is the change that I've observed, whether it's behavioral or whether that's product knowledge. If you can just dig a little deeper there, Siddhant, and if you can walk us through how that feedback comes to you and how do you process it in order to, let's say, improve, like you said, the training plan or upgrade the training plan. How do you process that feedback that you receive?
So, if you want to improve, so let's say for example, we created a training plan, right? We create a training program. We finish a training program on a set of people. Let's say for example, we do this training program for 20 odd people, right? When we complete this training program, we give them. So once that training is done, you have the initial feedback that you get from the candidates itself, and then the candidates have to perform on the in the real time, right? Maybe after a month, maybe you can discuss it with the supervisor, right? You can discuss it with them. Maybe after 30 days, you can sit together. So the trainer and the training manager and the, let's say, for example, we take the same example wherein you have the sales manager. So you have the training manager and you have the sales manager sitting besides, and you discuss on the training plan. First you talk to the sales manager that if we were targeting a certain number, are we hitting that number or not? Once that number is not in, that means somewhere there is a gap. Now the gap could be in how your training was facilitated or your training program was wrong. So you look at the training program, you reevaluate your training program, you make those changes once you identify your training program. It could be, you wanted, your product knowledge had to be changed, or you missed out on something, or there could be multiple issues with your training program. You rectify those training programs, and you go back to your sales team wherein you have actually trained them. You talk to them, and then you identify, right? Then you when you talk to them, and then you again identify where you have uh, that training program that you had created. I mean, the training program, the training that you have actually given to them, how that training has helped them, whether they are able to, as I said earlier, whether you are able to pitch your product better to your prospective client. Right now, if you look at the ground teams, if you look at the ground teams also, they have to pitch a product, and they have to know that the feature of a particular project. I'm just
Yeah.
giving you a ballpark example. uh, you explain those features of a particular product, and then that's how your product is sold. Once you identify all your gaps, you reevaluate your entire training program, you retrain them, right? You retrain them, and then you gauge again, right? And then, of course, you also incorporate the fact that you are connecting to your sales team with the line manager again and again, so that any sort of re-intervention is required on anything can be done immediately rather than waiting for a longer period of time.
Got it. Of course. Yeah. I think that definitely answers that question. Thank you, Siddhant. Rilif, over to you. If you could let us know what your evaluation metrics are.
Yes, I would like to add a few points along with the feedback. Right. So there is one more, aspect which is assessment. Maybe we can try an assessment pre the training and post the training. Right. This will give a clear picture of how the training actually helped them to build their knowledge. Along with that, I think we also should, uh, you know, uh, why we should understand why we have planned this training session. What was the training need identification? So right, if we have a clear picture, this is my TNI which I have taken into the consideration. If the needle has moved, maybe the TNI has improved, then the training plan has actually effectively been delivered, or maybe effectively used in the restaurant, or maybe the team members started implementing the processes. So that can be a process improvement, or maybe there is an improvement in any of the KPI which we have actually taken into the consideration. So these are the two ways which I would like to add along with the feedbacks while evaluating training.
Got it. So the assessment bit, and I like how you said whether how much the needle has moved tells you what can be done, whether it's an improvement or like a process change is
Yes.
required. I think that's quite interesting to note. Anrita, your thoughts?
So the way that I see it, if it is a product training, identifying the needle movement is possible. If it is a process training, absolutely possible and can be easily done as well. If it is in terms of, let's say, compliance, it's an easy cake. But if it is a behavioral training, if it is a leadership training, if it is touching aspects in terms of very human dealings and behaviors and at work, then it becomes a little challenging and tricky. So, as my two panelists did mention in terms of feedback, which is, let's say, gauging the reaction of the learners then and there, which is your level one of Kirkpatrick. Level two is definitely the learning retention, which can measure through the pre and post training assessment. But when it comes to any program, uh, like the way that I go about it, I have three S to take care of. What is the specific problem is my first S. My second S is in terms of to to have a solution, there have to be a very simple design. And my third S is the success metrics. How do I solve my specific problem using a simple design, and what is the success quotient that I'm attaching with it? So these are the three S that I follow. I'm going to give you one example in terms of, let's say, a process or a compliance. For example, if you see something as simple as a food safety training. So as an organization, a lot of us would have a food safety training, ongoing training, any safety training for that matter. We will keep constantly do it, right? For a hygiene check to ensure that the right kind of food hygiene is maintained because it's consumed by the customer. There are also business parameters attached to it. For example, if I'm running one food safety program for store A, B, C, D, I will go back and check what is the food audit parameters or score that has happened before and after the training as well. Were they achieving those business parameter? Maybe no. Hence, they were identified as my problematic zones or problematic stores. After the training, are they able to actually deliver in terms of their day-to-day operation as well? So, is the learning implied and explicitly exhibited at the work is also something that I would like to gauge. Having a direct business angle put in place. But if it is a leadership program, now that is a little tricky, right? So, for example, in one of the program, you have, let's say, 25 odd people whom you have picked across different stores or different business units, and you are preparing a next level. They are mid to senior level, people. You have invested 6 months in terms of giving them a leadership development journey or a plan in place, and now what do you do? Are they, is the game the way that you have actually envisioned? Maybe not, but there are certain parameters definitely you can see, you can also attach in terms of not only learning, not only the 360-degree, not only the supervisory feedback, but also how many of them are able to get up and get the next role for themselves. Among those 25, maybe 5 have left, 20 are there. Out of 20, 7 got promoted. That is definitely a good success metrics to consider. Out of 3 maybe left. Now, why those 3 left are also an attrition of your top talent must also be considered for a program like leadership. So, in my opinion, any training has to have a direct understanding in terms of what problem I'm trying to solve through this. And that becomes my lever or an understanding in terms of this is something that I want a delta movement to happen from a bad state to good state. And many of the trainings are, many of the request or requirement that comes to me are sometimes not even a training issue. And I think as L&D folks, we need to evaluate, understand, and very clearly spell it out that this is not an issue that can be solved or resolved through a training intervention, through a learning campaign. No, I think there is a different ways, and you can put your thoughts to the respective people whom you want to discuss. So yeah.
So very, very structured. I think you told us what is it, depending on the type of training, what is the measure of success, your 3 S's, and definitely also acknowledge that sometimes as L&D, our department may not have the answers to all the problems that the organization has, but can we see what is the best midway point that we can get to? Okay, so thank you, Anirita, for that. Actually, we're going to come to a section of the panel discussion that I'm most excited about. And this is where, since we've already listened to the experiences of our panelists, I want to ask them to walk us through a live scenario where they're going to plan a particular training intervention, and walk us through how is it that they do it, how do they structure it, what are certain strategies they're thinking of. And the scenario or the idea with which they're going is the fact that a group of people have come to them and asked them to train them on becoming their favorite superhero. right? The reasoning behind this particular, let's say a case study kind of analysis here is to drive home the point that training, design, and implementation is not just knowledge, it's a skill. It's a skill that can work irrespective of the context we are in. So whether that's training in a product sense, process, or customer centric, or training to be your favorite superhero, the training implementation or training design is a skill that is transferable. So as the audience, as all of us, I know there are about quite a few of us who have joined this panel discussion. This is where we can actually see if we can do like a thinking activity together, where when the panelists share their training plan for a group of people to be their superheroes, can we think and question the panelists to say, you said A, but I'm thinking B. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about why A seems to be your best solution? Can you tell me why this intervention may not work because you've thought of some strategy here? This is the place where we can draw back some strategies and take it back to our organizations and try it out, because the context here is irrelevant. It's the skill with which the panelists are designing the training plan that we can definitely take something away. So just to recap what we're doing here, the panelists will be taking us through a training plan that they're just going to create and walk us through for a group of people who want to be their favorite superhero. And us as the audience, we listen in and maybe pick out certain ideas and ask the panelists to maybe answer it a little better or probe in that particular area to understand it a bit better. So panelists, over to you. Do you want to volunteer to go first, or do I pick any volunteers to go first for this particular activity?
You can pick, I guess.
I can pick, okay. Rilif, I'm going to pick you first because
Yes,
both
yes.
Anrita and Siddhant have gone first. And then Siddhant, I'll pick you next and we'll end with you and Rita. If
Yes.
just being conscious of time, if we can spend 2-3 minutes explaining the training plan will be helpful. And at the same time, I've noticed we've got 2 questions from Amitava and Ved. So panelists, if you're free, just feel free to type in their answers because they seem generic and we can either address them in the last, or if you'd like to answer them immediately, please do go ahead. Rilif, over to you.
Yeah. So I think so for an normal people to become a superhero, that's a great desire, and it's not an easy task to achieve, right? So wherever the task is difficult, uh, the training is the solution, right? So the how much people get trained, the task gets more easier, right? So with this thought, if a normal people wanted to be a superhero, for example a G1, right? uh, Obviously, as a trainer, I'll just ensure that what are the important qualities or what are the important powers which a superhero should have, right? So what I'll do is I'll just note down the requirements of a superhero. These are the requirements. What are the qualities which are matching the superhero? I'll design a training program which will actually help to improve on those quality which are required for becoming a superhero. And all obviously there should be a metric, or maybe there should be some sort of numbers which we can try and put it right. For example, for for becoming a superhero, one should have some these qualities, and those qualities needs to be measured. So for a normal people, this quality is based on the 0 to 10 ranking is this, and post becoming a superhero, the ranking for those qualities has came to this, right? So based on the qualities, which qualities require still improvement, right? Maybe few of the qualities are good, and few of the qualities the normal people is not try to match. Maybe for those qualities we know we should we need to plan some sort of retraining, right? And the normal guy should at least try and focus more on those requirements which are actually is not meeting with the criteria. So this is how, if a training needs can if the training can be planned, the participant will be helped to equipped with the skill set which are required. And maybe uh, after practicing those skill sets and retraining on those sets of skill which are required more attention to it, this will get improved and overall holistic we will get overall holistic superpower in a normal guy. So this is how I would try and plan a training plan for becoming a superhero like a G1.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Radif. I made a note of some of your strategies that you've used, and maybe I'll summarize it in the end. Amitava has a very specific question for you. So maybe you can interact with him directly and type the answer there, because he's asking you to emphasize on the mode of training that you would use, the blend percentage, and why you would use that. So maybe you could choose to answer it at the end, but if you'd like to type in that answer, that would work as well.
Okay.
Nand, over to you. So Siddhant, I think you may have to turn on your mic. You are on.
Very sorry. So, to train somebody to become a superhero, I would first, let's say, for example, if I'm training 10 people to become a superhero, first we need to understand the why behind those 10 people. So, I would say that, getting the objective that why do you want to become a superhero? So, if you look at any superhero story, they have their own whys that, okay, shot my somebody shot my parents, that is why I want to become superhero. Something has happened to them in the past, that is why they want to become a superhero. So there is a why behind all those 10 people. So understanding that why, once we get that why, we finalize an objective that, okay, this is the objective. And of course the objective becomes, to fight the evil from my city or from my country. So that's the part. So you have an objective in place. Once you have an objective in place, so since this is a case study, you already have somebody to train those 10 people. But in certain cases, if you don't have, so you'll find a mentor or you'll find a coach, right? So that somebody can guide you through the right path, or if not 100% path, maybe somebody who can tell you, okay, 70% you can go right, and then 30% is your own decisions. Then you need to plan the training devising into two major categories, which is a mental training and the physical training. So when we say mental training, the mental training can have multiple exercises depending upon what type of personality traits or behavior is expected out of them, right? Depending upon what type of superhero they become. So if they become something, so if they are plan try if they want to achieve something like a Spider-Man type of thing, so they have to be agile, they have to be, something that comes to them before something hits, right? If they're planning to become, let's say, if they're planning to become Batman, so you have to have the skill there wherein you're standing in some, if you're standing somewhere and nobody knows that, okay, you're there. So these are the traits, or these are the behaviors that you'll have to inculcate in them. That's part one. So this is more of a mental part, right? So you will have your discipline, you'll have your strategic thinking, you'll have, you should know how something which is justice, that, okay, you'll be the one who will be doing justice to the normal society, right? Then you'll have to be adaptable, that, okay, someday you are in some country, someday you are in some country, so you'll have to be adaptable to your surroundings. Then since we are in 2024, there is something called as tech. So they should be aware of tech. I mean there are very few superheroes currently, so that's one. Then once the entire training is there, then we have assessments wherein you can tell people, okay, something wrong is happening in this city, you can go and fight them. Then you have, okay, level B, or maybe you must have seen in multiple things, grade, they level those dangers. So you have level 2 danger, okay, this team has to go. Level 4 danger, this team has to go. And then you assess them thoroughly. And then once you figure out that, okay, they are very bad at this, and then you call them back and you send a different team. So that's how your training plan should look like, so somewhere around, and that's how your training should go. So
Great.
that's my take.
Very, very interesting points. I have noted it down towards my summary. Anrita, over to you.
I am really, I don't know what to say. So I feel like a shield operator, operative agent. Well, to begin with, um, the first thing that I would do probably is to identify people, identify the talent who have one thing in common. Let's say serving mankind, right? So I will probably identify one parameter for my talent initiative. Now, these are the people whom are going to be getting identified, trained, and getting ready for, let's say, next assignment, next mission, right? So when I do this, now I have identified a young Spider-Man who is probably 14 or 15. Then maybe I have an Iron Man, and I have uh, the Captain America, and so on and so forth. Now, the way that I see is, now each one of them have their uniqueness, their ability. And I would say, be it a superhuman or be it just a human, we all are unique in our own way. And in order for me to probably arrive at a concrete plan, I will definitely have a frame in mind. For example, let's say I have a mission which is, let's say, saving Earth 2.0, and this is the particular multiverse that I'm referring to. And these three individuals are supposed to fight against all the calamities, fight against all the evil and the monsters. Now, for me to do that, I will probably run an assessment center to gauge where they are currently with their potential. So they are performing individual. They have caught my attention because they have that metal in them. But for me to first know where they stand today, to whatever foresee challenges that I see in the future, I need to probably up their game, help them to up their game, right? Once I take them through this journey of them knowing where they stand in terms of what are the things that they need to do, and they are also in the process of, probably we can have one mentor assigned to them. We can give them assess programs to upskills themselves going forward, and definitely some life projects. And I think, in my opinion, any you're training a group of people, or you're mentoring or coaching certain leaders, the ideal way to go about it is to have teams and groups, so that learning never happens in isolation, right? And as you have given me, you've asked me to pick up probably superheroes in this scenario. uh, so so this might be a little controversial, because I'm picking Wonder Woman, because she's from DC, and we're referring to Marvel. But just consider this as an individual. Now, this Wonder Woman is a demigod, right? To those who don't know, she is half human and half god. Now, she was never born; she was made out of clay. And this is what our job is as L&D folks. Our job is to mold that clay. For us to do that, identification of right talent, giving them the right resources, giving them a project or a aim, so that they can reach to that destination. The entire journey has to be curated, designed, and delivered in such a fashion that there is no I was no stone unturned, and the journey to learn and grow is theirs. Our job is to design, implement, and see what they have done. And in this process, one thing that I would do, and something that I keep asking my team to do, is have a lot of communication with your stakeholders, with their supervisors, with the individual, so that with each journey that they are going, because I'm referring to a process intervention, right? So they've gone through the assessment. Now they're assigned a project. Now they're working on a project, and the end game is yet to happen, right? So for them to be there, go there, each one need to bring their unique self forward, uh, upskill where they lack, and consider all different skill set together. And I think one skill set that I would probably say for each one of us today, one, or I think one or two maybe, one, your ability to communicate, and your ability to use digital platforms. So these two will be my must. Be it any field that you are, these two will be my must. If you are a, if Iron Man is giving an interview, or Captain America is shying away from one, doesn't matter. But when you are there, you know, inspiring the lot, the using the right choice of what matters, your ability to use your technology to the best advantage as learners of this age and era, as professional of this age and era, is important. So I will have some constant learning parameters and some flexible parameters to see how they are performing at the end, and then I will see how the journey have been for them and as for me as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I think with all of you talking about your training plans, I've definitely made some very specific strategies that you spoke about. I think from Relief, we're getting the idea of what is the desire, why do they want to be trained? We need to be able to understand what is it that our participants hope to gain out of our training. Training for repetition, he's looking at not a one-time intervention, but can we repeat the intervention as and when they need it so they can improve. He talked about how he'd have a separate metric if they were normal human beings. So pre-training, what was their metric? After they became a superhero, what is their training metric that they had? Similarly with Siddhant, I love the fact that he said, why do we want to be superheroes? Can we look at that aspect? And the fact that after they were trained, he talked about how we put them into different level danger situation, right? Level 1 scenario, level 2 scenario. So similarly, can we draw some learnings out of that to say, after we've given them training, can we give them a level 1 assessment, a level 2 assessment, and so on, and kind of gauge their abilities there. From Anrita, we can definitely take away the fact of identifying common parameters. What is it that binds everybody together? Understand that each of them have very specific skill sets that may be different, but can be channeled towards one specific purpose that you want to achieve, which is your training outcome. The assessment center, definitely a good idea to understand and gauge current capabilities so that we will be able to figure out what is the training intervention required to take them from like a 1 to like a 1.5. I think those strategies came out very clearly from all of your discussion. Just to quickly wrap up, something that I want to ask all of you, and this can just be a sentence or two for you to share before we see if we have any last minute questions to take, is when you do these training interventions, or when you've done the training interventions in the past, what are some preconceived notions that you used and said, okay, I'm designing this for these set of people. But then when you actually went to the ground and when you implemented your training plan, you realized, oh, that was just a myth. This preconceived notion is not reality. It's not factual. I should change the way I'm thinking. So what was that myth, or what is that preconceived notion that you had, which was later turned out to be a myth that you then designed your training intervention for? Anrita, we'll start with you very quickly. Siddhant, followed by you, and then we'll end with Rilif.
Sure. So one thing that I came across was all the content, the assessment, anything has to be in English. This was an ask from my stakeholders from the top to bottom, and that was a little challenging. But so we have recently devised something in terms of a field-based teaching. So these are 2 minutes content which we record, and then we use that in terms of our training content pan India. So, as our people are spread in north, south, and east, it was very challenging to come up with so many vernacular languages. And when I started implementing, and I went ahead and with only English as my language, so my facilitator job was to translate. But I saw that my frontliners were able to easily comprehend a simple English, which was fantastic for me to experience, because I think we think more in terms of the frill rather than we try to understand what is happening. So that was one for me for sure.
Thank you for sharing, Anrita. I think and then Siddhant.
So, based on content only, initially when we went live with our own systems, we had there were modules that we had created, and when we were creating those modules, somehow we had this in mind that okay, these people are so the frontliners that we are that people work. I mean, the ground teams that are working is well versed with mobile. They have grown up with the mobile in hand. So we had this thing in mind that okay, it is very easy for them to navigate. Once you have the course open, then it is very easy for them to navigate. So we had a lot of interactions in one module. So even a short module will have a lot of interaction, will have a lot of games, and somehow when we actually dived into the teams and when we spoke to them, that whether how well they are able to understand a particular module, these particular set of modules, these particular set of modules, we can, we got to know that, okay, despite them being tech savvy, or maybe, they're working on, they're using their mobile phones since long, even those modules, the understanding that they were able to draw was not even 50%. And then immediately we, went back and redesigned the entire thing. We made the flow extremely user friendly, very basic, and then we, got this up that, okay, we'll have to look at the UI whenever we make such content, and then we'll have to roll it off. So that was my first ever experience when we were designing the e-learning wala part.
Got it. Thank you for sharing, Siddhant. Riley?
Not the specific examples which I can, share on on the training metric, or maybe some sort of training which were not, required at the ground level. The major reason is, we work on the TNIs, right? What are the TNIs, which are the requirement, and based on the requirement, we only prioritize the trainings which are, highly important for our, ground teams, and which will help them to improve on customers experience KPIs. So this is how actually we plan our training. So usually I have not came across any sort of, trainings which were, not required at the for the our ground team.
Got it. Thanks, Dilip. So I think before we close out the discussion, we have a question that I'm going to open up to the panelists that you can choose to answer. So I think this was in context of evaluations or conducting training. So how does multi-stakeholder play a role in maybe an evaluation or presentation to a multi-level stakeholders that have inputs? And how do you ensure that the same metrics of evaluation has been adhered, because different stakeholders might have a different measure of success for your training intervention? So how do you maybe consider all of those multi-stakeholder requirements, and how would you deliver your training outcome presentation in a similar manner? Open to the panel.
Sure. So I'm taking up this question, Susanna. So one thing that I would say is, when you design your plan in terms of rollout, right? So include your stakeholder then and there.
Mhm.
The consensus has to happen then and there,
Mhm.
and then thereby the execution happens much more smoother. That's in my opinion.
Mhm.
Sometime it might happen, as an L&D folk we understand and we would want to have an issue to be dealt in a certain way, but if we work in isolation it will never work in our favor for sure. So for example, you're designing a first time manager program. So what are the parameters, what is that you're going to teach, who are your audience, align every stakeholder. People might not give that kind of a program very much of importance. It's easier if you talk about sales program, they might say yes. You talk about service program, they may say yes. But first time managers, they might say why. I mean, they're already managers, they are dealing with people under them. But for you to give a structure, you have to make them understand in terms of why it is being done. Show them the attrition reports. Show them the voice of the people sitting at the ground staff, telling that we are not happy with our managers. Accumulate all this resources, information, present a case, come to a consensus, and then roll out. I think if you try to go backwards, once you have rolled out and then try to communicate, it doesn't work. People will not agree. And you should always have one, two, three. Maximum your thumb rule should be three metrics to be gauged. Three is also too much in my opinion, but limited success metrics, so that you can see the delta movement very clearly, and align before. Once you've designed the plan, align, roll out, measure. That is how I would do.
Got it. I think that was the only question we had left. Unless if there are any other questions, please do feel free to put them in the Q&A before we close. But other than that, thank you so much for joining, audience. You've been, I think, with at least the Q&A, you've been quite interactive with us. And definitely for the panelists, I think you've shared quite a few insights and practical strategies that we've taken, that we can take away from this. And definitely, as during the week, we will share out a PDF or something similar with all of these resources put in, so we can look at what strategies that we've come together in terms of discussing what can actually work and ensure that the ground reality of training the frontline team members can be a successful outcome by implementing at least one or two of these strategies, which we previously may not have considered. So thank you so much, panelists, for your time. You've truly been quite insightful with your experiences, and the fact that you shared them with such nuance, and the fact that it was so clearly communicated to us, it was really helpful. So thank you again for your time, and thank you, audience and the attendees, for taking out the time to be with us for this hour. We will see you in the next initiative, and over to Elsa to close us out.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. I'd like to thank our moderator and our panelists for their time, valuable insights. This was absolutely helpful. To the attendees, we'd love to hear from you about today's session. Also, if you'd like to know more about the series that we are doing about knowledge sharing, you can visit Frontline Insights on our website. There's a small survey at the end of the call. Please do fill that in. It'll help us to create better aligned content for you. Our next webinar session would be on 23rd April. Looking forward to seeing you guys there. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Bye.